It's showtime!
Welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge podcast, where we talk about leadership and successful entrepreneurs and veterans come and tell their story. I hope you enjoy the show. Follow me. Let's go. This podcast is brought to you by Victory Leadership Coaching, your premier leadership training and coaching provider. You can learn more at victoryleadershipcoaching.com, and you can also purchase their book, Why Organizations Should Develop Their Leaders, a pocket guide at amazon.com. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me. It's somebody who's still serving in the military. I don't get too many people on here that are still in. Usually we talk about the after show, so maybe we'll get a little bit of other insight from the inside today. But no, his name is Kyle Hogan, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Kyle, you want to give an introduction and tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Great, sure thing. First and foremost, thanks for having me on here and having an opportunity to have a conversation. Love leadership. I'm passionate about it. Been doing it for a couple decades, so that's what I want to chat about. But been in the service for about 30 years, 35 to be exact. Came in as an enlisted guy, got out, went to college, came back as an officer, and have spent the better part of the last 2 decades in positions of leadership. And I am on the active side for the next about 4 months, and I'm transitioning. I'll do that public, the private pivot transition that a lot of us go through, and I'm looking forward to what's in the next chapter. But if there's anything I can do to help enable others not to repeat my mistakes and learn from what I've done, it's our job as leaders to give it all away and not take it with us.
I completely agree. As a matter of fact, I couldn't agree more. We try to do that with our kids, but it doesn't always work.
Sometimes they just don't want to listen.
No, they just don't want to listen. No, but okay. So what do you do for the Army right now?
So in my current role, I am the commander of Corpus Christi Army Depot. So within, the overarching defense industrial base, the things that enable us to be protected as a nation is kind of split in half. There's the commercial side. You hear about, Northrop Grumman or General Dynamics or Lockheed Martin. That's the commercial side. I'm on the organic side. So each service branch has its own ability to organically repair, manufacture, remanufacture, and overhaul equipment for the service that they're in. Within the Army, there's 23 of these sites, and I have the aviation portfolio for the Army, 3 different weapon systems from a aviation perspective that the Army has, Black Hawk, Chinooks, and Apaches, and then all of those components, transmissions, gearboxes, engines that make the aircraft run, we do the remanufacturing or resetting, if you will, and then send them back out to the warfighter. So that's sort of the organization that I have oversight on here down in South Texas.
Okay. Yeah, I actually did a lot of business with them when I was on active duty, specifically when I was deployed. So I worked transportation when I was in the military. And so for a little while, I had the role of helping out with the AOG. So for the listeners who don't know what that is, that's the aircraft on ground. So when an aircraft needs to get back into service and it's been broken down, you got to, especially in a combat zone, you got to get those parts quickly. And so I worked a lot with his depot to get parts or source parts from other places throughout the country and get those there pretty fast. So very familiar with your organization. It's an important one to the military. I'll tell you that much right now.
Absolutely. So for those that are not necessarily within the service, just think you got a flat tire and you got to find a Firestone. I'm Firestone.
Yes. A little bit more than Firestone, but Firestone nonetheless.
No doubt. No doubt.
So, a lot of people say it a different way. I give the Army's definition and I give the Webster's definition of leadership when I'm talking to people. But, to you, what does leadership mean? I know you even have your own business on the side of what you're doing. So I'm sure you describe it a bunch of different ways as well. So what does it mean to you?
I think for me, leadership is something that has evolved over time, and maybe that's a good perspective from a maturation process. So as you develop and grow as a leader, maybe your definition should expand a little bit. So I'd look at it as the ability to achieve organizational success while developing subordinates to achieve their greatest outcome.
Oh, that's wonderful. When you talk about organizational success, that can mean so many different things, but at the end of the day, it's creating that environment that people want to be a part of. And, when you create that want to be a part of instead of have to be a part of, then they do the work because, not that they're people pleasers necessarily, but they're doing it because you've created influence, not just with them, but there's that culture built in there. And so that's how things end up becoming successful.
Absolutely. So if you look at success in a military standpoint, defend our nation, defend our freedoms. That is at the end of the day what we are required to do. And to be specific, in the maneuver, fires, and effect world, from a shooter perspective, to close with and destroy the enemy, to seize and hold key terrain, to make the outcome positive in a victory standpoint, to win. We don't hire the services in the Army specifically to lose. We hire them to win and to protect our nation. So if you apply that in a business setting, your goal is to achieve a profit. Your goal is to win. So in a corporate setting, in a small business, in a restaurant, any type of environment, the key to success is, are you winning or losing? And understanding, how does your leadership impact that? If you are losing, what are you doing to get back to the winning side? You can be a football coach and talk through those metaphors and those analogies, or, selling tires. All of those, at the end of the day, the goal is to win. And win could be defined in many different ways, but a lot of time it's in a commercial sector as revenue.
Yep. Of course it is. And I mean, you don't have a business without it. So, if you're just sitting still, a lot of people will say you're dying. Well, a business, if it's sitting still and it's not producing that revenue, well, then it can't support those people that have to support their families. And so, yeah, a lot of people complain, well, I'm only a number in my business. Well, you're a person, but you're also a number. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to balance everything so that the whole organization doesn't tank and then nobody has a job.
Absolutely. So service beyond self. If you're an employee in an organization, you want to be able to provide for yourself and your extended family, but for yourself. But if you're not looking at achieving a greater goal of something beyond you, then it's very difficult to have the inertia and the fortitude to help the greater organization be successful, whether that's, a restaurant, a hospital, or whatever organization just achieving revenue is defined as.
So I would like to talk about the success model that you mentioned in the post yesterday that we were talking about. But first, can you tell us a little bit about Unpolished Leadership and kind of what you do for the community that you serve?
So right now, I'm on the bench with the Army as part of the Army coaching program. I was fortunate enough to go through as a client quite a few years ago, and then through the selection process for command, was able to go through as a client. And I thought it was professionally changing for me in a positive direction. We were wargaming in a previous organization that I was a part of, the Sergeant Major and I, and we went through a sort of a team to become executive coaches because we wanted to change talent development in our organization. In the public sector, there are limits on resources and benefits and things you can provide specifically to soldiers. So what could we give a soldier that's equivocal to what's provided in the private sector for their high performers that are hypos, or those that they see operating at the highest level? So we are using that as a talent management and a talent retention tool. It evolved to becoming credentialed and operating as a coach, both for the service, for the DoD, but also I have an LLC on the side. That Unpolished Leadership to me is polishing someone to be the best that they can become. I believe leadership is innate. I believe everybody has some level of leadership. Some people are just naturally gifted, just like a natural athlete. You see guys that are very successful. I would argue that Patrick Mahomes is more of a natural athlete than Brady, but Brady's work ethic, he polished himself to be the best that he can be. Again, we can, semantics through that, but that's where the emblem from Unpolished Leadership, it's a stone and a knife. And the goal is, you sharpen a stone, or you polish a stone and you sharpen a knife to be the best that you can be.
I love that. And actually, you taught me something, because I didn't even know that the Army used a coaching organization to help polish senior leaders. That's not something that I knew. I mean, I retired as a warrant officer, so that's not something that I was necessarily privy to, but that's kind of cool.
If I just double back on that just slightly. So Talent Management Task Force, it was established quite a few years ago, which handled the Army assessment program for 05 and 06 level commanders and now sergeant majors. They really own that piece, and the Army coaching program was falling underneath them. So that's where my start with coaching began. And unpolished leadership is just my thing on the side.
Sure.
But the Army coaching program is a thing, and it's nested within the greater DoD coaching. So if there are any listeners within the DoD or within the Army and you're looking for a coach, there's a bench of coaches available, and it's free to the service member. All you have to do is provide some time and your own energy to execute that. Shameless plug.
You said shameless plug?
Yep.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with making sure you have a coach. I mean, I brief this to everybody that I talk to because coaching is one of those things where they don't really understand it. So they know how athletes can use a coach, but they don't understand how the executive world can use a coach. And I always say, hey, look, if in the sports world, they take great athletes and make them champions, well, in the executive world, why can't that be any different? You're taking somebody who is really good at their job and you're giving them some additional support on the back end to push them past their limits a little bit more and make them be the best that they can be. I mean, it's coaching.
Absolutely. As you distill a little bit of the nuanced differences between the sports metaphorical coach and then the executive coach, on the sports side, it's mirroring almost a mentorship relationship where you're getting a lot of directedness. And then on the executive side, if you're looking from the credentialed coaching piece of it, it's self-determination theory. You're pulling out all of those natural attributes that individual has, and you're allowing them to see themselves almost like a mirror in a little bit better light than what they were before. We consider them, whole, they're already good, but how can you pull out those little nuances to take them from that 90% to that 100%? They already have it within them. Your job as a coach is just be able to identify and help them pull it out.
Yeah. So I completely agree. And, there's another part to that. It's not just pulling that out of them. I mean, when you're coaching somebody, not in the athletic world, I mean, it's question based, and you're helping them come up with their own plans and stuff like that, because they already know what to do. They hit an impasse because they hit an impasse. And so a really good coach helps them get the rest of the way because they help that person make their own plan to success. And then there's that accountability piece, which is so important. You can't take somebody to the next level without that accountability piece.
They have to be willing to see themselves to identify what those shortfalls are, whether it's with emotional intelligence and the soft skills or the messaging that they're providing. And when I share with folks, you'll hear a lot of individuals say, hey, I'm just being honest, or I'm telling them the truth. So the metaphor I use is truth can be used in two ways. It can be used as a sword. What is the condition of your own heart? Why are you being truthful in that action? Or it can be used as a shield to help protect someone to understand where they're going. So look at your condition, where are you at, and why are you providing that truth? So maybe that senior leader is delivering a lot of swords when he or she may want to use a little bit more of a shield.
Yep. Yeah, because your words can actually destroy somebody just as easily as they can build somebody up.
No doubt.
The coach has to be smart enough to be able to kind of determine when to use which, because sometimes people need a smack upside the back of the head. Hey, no, get in the game. And, but you got to do it the right way. And then other times, you need to be truthful with them in a way that's going to build them up, to give them more confidence so that they can take action on whatever that next step is.
Don't lose the message with the delivery.
Correct. That's a very smart way to put it. So success, I'd like to talk about that for a few minutes. Can you
Absolutely.
define what that looks like to you?
In what context? Because we get a little bit nuanced when we start playing with the semantics. Success as an individual, as a service member, success as a coach, success as a client, success in a business. So let's distill that out just slightly.
Sure. Well, I'm just going to use the exact example that you provided yesterday, which already know what it is, but I'm going to say it. You typed in there the path to success while enabling others. Can you tell us what that path looks like?
Absolutely. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, my leadership journey has evolved, and thankfully it has. And you'll hear people talk about, well, I knew them as such and such, and they've changed. What you don't want is the same 21 or 28 or 32 or 42-year-old. You want people to grow and mature over time to continue to evolve that leadership wherewithal to be able to support success in others. So for me, success has grown from being an individual to more of a team sport where if I'm achieving success, who am I bringing with me? Who am I empowering? Who am I enabling? Who am I giving that pathway? If your expectation is for somebody to perform here, but you see them performing here, that pathway is your responsibility to leader. Show them what to do. It's incumbent upon them to execute, but that path to success is at the individual level. But as leaders, it's our job to show them the way.
You're absolutely right. There was nothing more gratifying for me before I became a warrant officer when I was still enlisted. I had an NCO that worked for me when I was an E5 who, I was an E7 and she was already on the selection list for E8 while I was getting ready to go to warrant officer school, but she surpassed me. And, I know I didn't do that whole process with her. I mean, we were together at one duty station. We did a deployment together and so on and so forth. But to know that I had a piece of that. And then when I talked to her, she thanked me so much for that little piece that I gave her when she was a young junior enlisted person. It made me feel very good. And, it made me feel good, not because, I'm all about myself. No, it's because my hard work and dedication does not go unnoticed. People appreciate when you feed into them. That's why leadership is so important. Leadership is not about you. Leadership is about others, serving others. When you lose sight of that, that's when the whole idea that I was discussing earlier, where you start looking at people as a number, starts to get a little bit dicey. When you start forgetting that those numbers and names have a face behind them, it gets to be a really, really tough thing, because then you don't care about the amount of hours that they're putting in, the kind of effort that they're putting into their job. You just want things to get done. And then in the construction world, I've coached a few people and done some education programs with some people, and they always use that analogy of bringing the bigger hammer. I hate that analogy. You don't bring a bigger hammer. So that's when it gets to be a little bit dicey.
There's an aspect of ego that's involved sometimes when you see leaders that fall off or get caught up and they think it's more about themselves. And I've been extremely fortunate to work for some amazing leaders over the course of my career, and I think it started very early. I had some powerful technical experts that taught me the aviation business and the repair and return business very early, and all the way through where I am now. The assumed trust when you go into a position, when you're working, there's almost an inherent need to trust immediately. Now, again, trust but verify, because doers do what checkers check, but making sure that you trust those around you. So as you collectively win, it's not just an individual win, but a collective win. There's always great competition. It's like sibling rivalries that, who's got the best sales metrics, or who's meeting their dashboard metrics. And are we accomplishing, is this product line meeting its objectives? Are we at schedule? Are we behind or ahead of schedule? Where are we? What is our quality defect rate? All of those are great things to do to instill a little bit of competition. But from a success and from a leader perspective, how are you enabling others to see themselves, see the bigger picture, so you can all continue to win together?
I agree. And you mentioned ego, and one of our viewers here, he mentions the ego is the enemy to leadership. The goal is, and I had this conversation with my good friend Derek. We do a Wednesday evening live stream every week. We talked about the ego and the super ego. So the whole idea behind that is, getting them to understand the difference so that they can think with the super ego instead of the ego. Because when you have that wisdom and the wherewithal to look at the bigger picture and apply everything together and bring people together to get the mission done, you are just a piece of the pie too. which a lot of people don't understand. They try to protect their job. Well, yeah, if you're a piece of the pie, the way to protect your job is to help other people also protect their job, and everyone work together so that you have the most cohesive team and the best possible work environment.
Absolutely. I had a technique a while back, and I'll probably get in trouble for sharing this, but I'm short final. So as an O4 commander, I had, I think, 9 platoon sergeants or E7s that worked for me, and I had them ranked on my whiteboard behind my desk. So you could walk by and you could see everybody's name. And there was a constant bickering about who was the top. I'm like, earn it. If you want to be number one, go be number one, but you got to earn it. Now, outside of our company area, I would never let that information go, who was one through whatever. And for those who've written evaluations, you understand there's some nuances to numbers and stratifying by years and making sure that you don't have 2. So I would never stratify somebody less than 3, because I knew even though I may have ranked them at 7 or 8, they would still crush any other organization if they were outside somebody else. But that competition internally, and that was my method to let them know how I seen them. I gave them feedback on where they fell, and it was on a dry erase board, so names went up and down all the time. And not as a matter to punish somebody, but again, this was an internal system that I used. But again, my first sergeant was involved in it. But we wanted folks to know where they stood and how they could be better. Hey, why am I number 4? Well, these are things we've asked you to do. These are areas that but it goes back to, you mentioned earlier, the accountability piece. Here's where you failed to account for yourself and your subordinates to achieve this overall goal.
At the end of the day, I bet they appreciated that more than you knew. They may have bickered about it, but people love to know where they stand, because the worst thing you could possibly do to another person at work specifically is when it comes time for the evaluation, they get that surprise smack in the face. Well, in the military, it depends on what year it was that they because I know they changed over the rating systems at one point, but whether you're an excellent or a superior or whatever the case may be, or maybe you're a little bit lower on the totem pole, well, if they find out at that quarterly or annual evaluation that that's where they stand, it's going to hurt them a lot more than if you constantly are giving them updates and communicating with them on what you expect and where they stand and how to get to that next level. I think that's a smart way to handle things. The worst thing you can do is leave them in the dark.
Absolutely. One of the greatest measures of success for me personally, I felt, is of those 9, the number of those individuals that went on at the 8 and the E9 level that were continuing to be very successful within the service. And I don't attribute it to me. They earned all of that on them. I'm just extremely humbled and proud to have been a part of their success along the way. And if there was things that I gave away to them to enable their success, that's what it's about. And that's where the egos, Kyle Hogan didn't make them better. Kyle Hogan allowed them to identify those attributes they already owned for them to be at the next level.
You help them with your measure in your current role at that point in time, and that if that translated to help them later on, well, if the statistics are good, then you probably did something to attribute to that. But that's not what it's all about. It's about when you're in your role, doing the very best that you can for not just yourself, but for everybody else in the organization, so that they're successful. Because if you only worry about you and your success, it's not going to happen. You got to make other people successful in order for you to be successful. And then, I'm a religious man. Not all my listeners are religious people, but I will say that when you give to others, God's grace will come. So
no doubt.
That's just kind of how it works. So, you have to give to receive.
I was very fortunate. Again, I've worked for some amazing leaders, and one leader in particular who's still a leader, maybe in my chain of command. He taught me when I showed up in El Paso in 2016, your job is to solve your boss's problems and his boss's problems. And I was like, all right, I like that. I wrote that down. And then the other thing he said, if your boss says something twice, you may want to pay attention to it. So I wrote that down too. And for the last 8 years, those are two things that have really stuck out to me that I've shared with others. Oh, he said it twice. Probably write that down. So
Yes.
the professional success that I've had along the way is directly attributed to others and pouring in and enabling me. But when I shift that into the private sector, into a corporate setting, what are the gaps? What products aren't being delivered? What challenges are being presented? So it's not necessarily your job when you pivot to understand the nuances of the product, but if you can apply the same processes and see what their process variation is, you can achieve victory even in the commercial world, creating a revenue as well.
Correct. And I think there's value because some people aren't as bold as we were in the military, and actually some military people aren't even really all that bold, to be quite honest with you. You have your soft-spoken people as well, even in the senior leader positions, but it doesn't hurt to walk up to your boss once in a while and just get an azimuth check. How have things been going? Do you need me to do anything for you? Is there anything I could be doing better, or something like that? I use that as a way for me to become successful, especially when I became a warrant officer, because it was just me and my NCO as a mobility warrant. And so when it comes to just me and her, you really have to communicate. I really had to communicate with my S4 or my G4 quite often to make sure that I'm meeting those objectives, because that dude was so swamped that he really didn't have time to come to me all the time and give me feedback or tell me how things were going. That's really not an excuse, but at the end of the day, when somebody doesn't really have anything in their emotional container to give, you have to reach out to them to make sure that you're helping them be successful.
That's a great perspective. And I think what you're speaking to is a greater level of communication between organizations and leaders and subordinates. And again, I'm big in war stories, and this is one that I got before I went to command at the O5 level. A good buddy of mine was already in command and had an event take place that disrupted his professional progression. And there was an incident where two commanders' peers had different relationships with their boss. My buddy, who again did not progress professionally, but he attributed it directly to his lack of communication with his boss.
Mm.
He was very good at what he did. He didn't need oversight. He didn't need anybody checking on him. But what he didn't establish was a routine communication methodology. So when push came to shove and if there was doubt now placed upon him, he had not gone past that barrier of understanding and trust. So the other individual that was involved already had that communication, already had that relationship. So it defaulted to him. And it's not I know both individuals think the world of both of them. It wasn't the one that continued professionally who did anything wrong, but he just had a more open and engaging communication style than my buddy who failed to do so because he was able to operate autonomously. So even if you feel like there are times where you don't need to talk to your boss,
You
just
should do
check
it.
in.
Yeah.
Just check in.
Yep. Sometimes it sounds horrible, but they kind of forget. Bosses forget. I used to forget. When I had an entire platoon, do you think there were people that I would sometimes leave in the dust because I was always focusing on the work and the high performers and all those things that people that have a ton of people working for them do? Absolutely. I tried very hard not to forget about people, but I did notice once in a while that people would get left in the dust. And it's not, and when you understand that from a leadership perspective, it makes you want to work even harder to make sure you're communicating with your boss, because you don't want him to feel like he put you at a deficit either. Because he will. He might not say it to you, or maybe eventually when he gets ready to go on to a new job, he'll say, JJ, I did not mean to leave you in the dust, but I don't think I gave you near as much attention at certain points of our mission that I probably should have. You don't want him to feel that way. We're all in it together. I mean, we win together, we lose together, we fight, we sleep, we camp, we do all the stuff, go out into the field and get all kinds of muddy together. That's the fun stuff that I miss, not the formations at midnight and stuff like that for what I sometimes consider to be weird and crazy stuff, but
Those
you
are
already
always
know
the
that. I mean, you smile, but you know.
Oh, I know, JJ. I'm with you. That's it's such a great perspective.
Yep. But, we're right at 29 minutes. So I'm going to, by the way, I want to say, Michael, you've been commenting a lot here. I've been having a great conversation with Kyle. I'm not leaving you behind. Please, if you're in my audience, engage with Michael to make sure that, and I will reply to everything that you've said, but you have such a good perspective there, Michael. So yeah, Kyle, do you have anything to share with the audience before we kind of close it out?
Absolutely. First and foremost, thanks for allowing me this opportunity to have a conversation and speak to your greater audience. And secondly, if you know me, I am by far I'm not perfect. And there's probably been times where my ego may have gotten in my way, or I have not made the greatest decision, or even the communication aspect I messed up on. So what I don't want people to misinterpret when I'm speaking in the public domain like this, that, hey, I've got it all figured out. I don't have a whole lot of figured out. I've figured some things out. Don't repeat my mistakes. Let me help you be successful going forward. And I appreciate each and every individual I've had an opportunity to be on their team.
Agreed. You're just like you said, it's not about us. We're always learning and growing as leaders, and it's important to acknowledge that. So thank you for sharing that, Kyle, and thank you for being a guest on this show today. And this will be aired, I think, actually not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after on my Spotify and everything else. So please,
fantastic.
Well, yeah. So it will be. My last one is scheduled for next week. So if you're listening in, make sure you tune into that. Make sure you comment there as well. Otherwise, I have nothing else. If this information resonates with you, please like it, subscribe to whatever channel you're watching this on. But more importantly, keep the conversation going and put a comment below so that we can keep the dialogue moving forward, because leadership is important. People don't focus on it nearly as much as they should, because it's what brings businesses and teams together.
Absolutely.
So thanks again, Kyle. And we're going to go ahead and sign out here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you enjoy these episodes, tune in and watch every week. I air a new episode every Wednesday. And if this information resonates with you, make sure you subscribe to my podcast. If you see it on my YouTube channel, subscribe to it there. But please make sure that you're raising awareness for leadership, because all problems can be solved with great leadership. On that note, I have leadership training for new managers. People promote their great employees to supervisors and managers without providing them with extra training. Don't do that to your people. Reach out to me if you want to hear more about that training. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.